Late night drives are supposed to be quiet, but sometimes the quiet feels intentional, like the road is letting you pass, but not letting you leave. People who listen to these stories usually come back. That's why they subscribe, before the road feels too empty. Story 1. Road that felt too empty. I should have known something was wrong the moment I realized I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. Highway 50 cuts straight through Nevada's emptiest stretch, a ribbon of cracked asphalt they call the loneliest road in America. I'd driven it dozens of times, hauling freight between Sacramento and Denver, always at night to beat the desert heat. But this time, the silence felt different. Heavier, like the darkness pressing against my windshield had weight to it, pushing back against my headlights with something that resembled intent. The highway should have had traffic, even at night. Instead, the silence made every mile feel deliberate. My CB radio had gone dead around mile marker 287, nothing but static hiss no matter which channel I tried. My phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual out here, but the battery was draining faster than it should have been. I watched it drop from 60% to 40% in less than 10 minutes. The truck's dashboard clock kept jumping forward in 5-minute intervals, then backward, then forward again. Time felt slippery, unreliable. I told myself it was just equipment failure, electrical problems, the kind of thing that happens to vehicles with 200,000 miles on them. But my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I couldn't blame that on bad wiring. The first truly disturbing thing happened at the abandoned gas station. I almost didn't stop. The place looked like it had been closed for 20 years. Pumps rusted into skeletal frames, windows so thick with grime they looked black. But my fuel gauge was creeping toward empty, and the next town was supposedly 40 miles ahead. I pulled into the lot, gravel crunching under my tires with sounds that seemed too loud in the overwhelming quiet. That's when I saw the handprints on my windshield. They covered the glass from the outside, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, overlapping in layers. Small hands, child-sized, pressed against the glass like kids trying to see inside. The terrifying part was that they were fresh. The glass was cold, the desert night dropping into the 40s, and these prints were still warm enough that condensation ringed each one. I could see the moisture evaporating as I stared, the prints fading slowly, finger by finger, like invisible children were pulling their hands away. I didn't get out to refuel. I threw the truck into reverse and got back on the highway, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. My headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, but the shadows at the edges seemed to move with purpose, keeping pace with my speed. 60 miles per hour, and the darkness ran alongside me like it was racing. That's when I started seeing the signs. Not road signs, messages, painted on the asphalt in what looked like white road paint, but the letters were wrong, backwards, like they'd been written to be read in a mirror. I caught fragments as my headlights swept over them, turned back. Too late. They were waiting. Each message made my stomach tighten another notch, fear coiling inside me like a snake. I pressed harder on the accelerator. 70 miles per hour, 80. The old truck shuddered and complained, but I didn't slow down. I needed to reach the next town, needed to see lights and people and proof that the world still existed beyond this empty stretch of highway that felt like it had swallowed me whole. Then I saw the other truck. It appeared in my rearview mirror without warning, headlights suddenly blazing behind me. An 18-wheeler, exactly like mine, close enough that I could see the grill in my mirror. Too close, dangerously close. I sped up, and it matched my speed perfectly. I slowed down, and it slowed with me, maintaining that same unsettling distance. I tried to get a look at the driver, but the cab was dark, empty looking. The truck drove itself, or seemed to, staying locked on my tail like it was tethered to my bumper by invisible rope. My CB radio crackled to life, static at first, then a voice. My voice, speaking words I hadn't, he said, describing the exact road I was on, the fear I was feeling, the creeping certainty that something horrible was hunting me on this endless Nevada highway. The voice was mine but wrong somehow, like a recording played at the wrong speed, just distorted enough to sound inhuman. The other truck, its horn blared, long and loud, the sound drilling into my skull. I watched in my mirror as it accelerated, closing the distance between us. Impact felt inevitable. I braced myself, knuckles white on the wheel, waiting for the collision that would send me spinning off into the desert. But it passed through me. I felt the cold as it happened, A wave of freezing air that turned my breath to fog and made frost spread across the inside of my windshield in fractal patterns. The other truck occupied the same space as mine for 3 horrible seconds, and I could see through my own hood into its interior. The cab was full of handprints, the same small handprints from my windshield, covering every surface, pressed against the windows from the inside like something had been trying desperately to escape. Then it was ahead of me, pulling away, taillights glowing red in the darkness. I watched it drive for another mile before it simply vanished, winking out of existence like someone had flipped a switch. The highway felt emptier after that, if such a thing was possible. The silence had texture now, a presence that filled the cab and pressed against my eardrums. I could hear my own heartbeat, my breathing, the creak of the seat springs. Nothing else. No wind, no insects, no distant sounds of civilization. Just me and the road in the darkness that felt like it was watching. Mile marker 312 appeared in my headlights. I'd been driving for 2 hours since the gas station, but according to my jumping dashboard clock, either 5 minutes or 7 hours had passed. The road should have brought me to the next town by now. Should have brought me somewhere. Instead, it just continued, straight and flat and empty, like a treadmill running beneath my tires. That's when I realized the horrifying truth. The highway wasn't taking me anywhere. I was trapped in a loop, driving the same stretch of road over and over, past the same mile markers, the same faded signs, the same patches of crumbling asphalt. The desert around me wasn't real desert, wasn't real anything. It was a space between spaces, a pocket of nowhere that the highway had slipped into, taking me with it. And I wasn't alone in here. The handprints returned, appearing on my windshield from the inside this time. Small fingers pressing against the glass, spreading slowly across my field of vision. I could feel the presence of children in the cab with me, invisible but undeniably there. The temperature dropped until I could see my breath, until frost covered the windows in thick sheets. The steering wheel grew cold under my hands, so cold it burned. The CB radio spoke again in my voice, but this time the words were different. How long have you been driving? Do you remember when you started? Do you remember where you were going? Do you remember anything before the road? I tried to answer, tried to remember, but my mind felt foggy, uncertain. When had I gotten on Highway 50? Yesterday? Last week? The memories were slippery, refusing to solidify. I remembered loading the truck, remembered checking the route, but the details kept changing every time I tried to focus on them. The children, whose handprints covered my windshield completely now, blocking my view. I was driving blind, steering by instinct, the road disappearing behind a wall of small, desperate hands. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine, could feel the weight of invisible bodies pressing against me from all sides. Then I saw the light ahead, not headlights or streetlights, but something else. A pale glow that hung above the road like a second moon, pulsing slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The road curved toward it, the first turn I'd seen in hours, and my truck followed automatically, pulled by some force stronger than my will to resist. As I got closer, I could see what the light illuminated. Cars, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all parked on the shoulder in a line that stretched as far as I could see. Old cars, new cars, trucks like mine, motorcycles, RVs. All empty, all covered in handprints. My truck slowed on its own, the engine dying, momentum carrying me to a stop at the end of the line. The silence was complete now, absolute. Even my heartbeat seemed to have stopped. I sat frozen behind the wheel, watching through the gaps between handprints as figures emerged from the desert. Small figures, children, or the shapes of children, their edges blurred and indistinct in the darkness. They surrounded my truck, pressing their hands against the windows, the doors, the hood. Hundreds of them, maybe more. All reaching, all trying to touch me through the metal and glass. Their faces were blank, featureless, but I could feel their need, their hunger, their desperate desire for something I had that they lost. The door handle turned on its own. The lock clicked open. Cold air rushed in, bringing with it the smell of ancient dust and something else, something wrong that made my throat close and my eyes water. The children pressed closer, their hands touching my arms, my face, my chest. So cold they burned like dry ice. And I understood. This was where the road had always been taking me. This was where it took everyone who drove it at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong kind of attention. The highway was a trap, a net spread across the desert to catch travelers and hold them in this pocket of frozen time and empty space. The children were other drivers, other people who had been caught before me, worn down by years or decades or centuries until nothing remained but the need to touch, to feel, to remember what it was like to be real. I would join them eventually. The cold was already spreading through my body, slowing my blood, dimming my thoughts. I could feel myself beginning to fade, to blur at the edges like they had. Soon I'd be just another set of handprints on someone else's windshield. Another invisible presence pressing against glass, trying desperately to remember what it felt like to be human. The last thing I remember clearly is my own hands pressing against the inside of my windshield, leaving prints that would stay there forever. Then the cold took everything else, and I became part of the highway, part of the silence, part of the empty road that should have had traffic but never would again. Story 2. Highway Beyond the Maps. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me 3 years ago. Something that changed the way I see the world. Something that made me understand that some roads don't appear on any GPS, and some journeys were never meant to have an ending. It started on a normal Tuesday night on Interstate 40, heading west through Nevada. I was exhausted, 20 hours of driving across the country to start a new job in California. My eyes were scratchy. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. All I wanted was a motel with a decent mattress and 6 hours of sleep. That's all I wanted. That simple, normal thing. But normal stopped existing at mile marker 312. That's when I noticed it. Driving for nearly an hour, I realized something terrifying and impossible. I hadn't passed a single car. No headlights in either direction. The absence of headlights felt intentional, like the highway itself had cleared a path for me alone. The road stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated only by my headlights cutting through the absolute darkness of the desert night. No other vehicles. No distant glow of a town. Just me and the asphalt bleeding forward into nothing. I told myself it was late. Almost 2 in the morning. Most people were sleeping. Truckers probably moved through earlier shifts. This was normal. This was fine. But something in my chest knew that wasn't the whole truth. I pressed harder on the accelerator. 70, 75, 80 miles per hour. The needle climbed. The white line painted down the center of the highway became a hypnotic blur. I wanted to reach the next exit, get to any motel with a flickering neon sign, any place where other people existed, where civilization remained intact. That's when I saw the first sign. Next service is 47 miles. I had just seen a sign like that maybe 40 minutes earlier. It said, next service is 50 miles. I did the math again. 40 minutes of highway driving. I'd done nearly 50 miles in that time. Yet the sign now claimed services were 47 miles away. I'd gotten closer by 4 miles, but time had moved forward. Something about that calculation felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I switched on the radio to distract myself. Static filled the car. White noise and crackling that seemed almost alive, almost purposeful. I twisted the dial. More static. Again and again. Every frequency was dead except for one station that kept jumping in and out. A preacher, its voice, distorted and frantic, talking about roads that led away from God, this world. Roads where travelers disappeared. Then the station dissolved back into hiss. I turned the radio off. The fear was settling into my stomach now. Not panic yet, just the cold, creeping certainty that something had fundamentally shifted. I watched the mile markers tick by. 315, 316, 317. Each one came too fast. I wasn't speeding anymore. I slowed to a reasonable pace, but the markers flashed past like something was compressing time itself. 30 minutes passed. No lights, no other cars, no signs of anything living on either side of the highway. Just darkness so complete and suffocating that it felt like the desert had swallowed the entire world and I was driving through its digestive tract. That is when I saw the rest area sign. Rest area 2 miles. I passed through enough of Nevada to know what rest areas meant. Concrete bathrooms, usually empty at this hour, but at least a place to stop. A place to think, to get my bearings and figure out what was happening. Because something was happening. The creeping fear had transformed into something sharper, more focused. Something was very wrong with this stretch of highway. I took the exit. The rest area appeared exactly as advertised. A small parking area with maybe 8 spaces. A concrete building with a flat roof. A single light mounted on the corner, casting everything in sickly yellow. No other cars, no sign of any human presence in hours, maybe days. I pulled into a parking spot near the entrance and killed the engine. The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat in my car with my hands still gripping the steering wheel, listening to the metal cooling, the tick and pop of the engine as it relaxed from the long drive. Outside, absolutely nothing. No wind, no desert sounds, no distant hum of traffic. The silence was so complete that it pressed against my ears like physical pressure. I got out of the car. The air felt wrong, too still, too cold for a desert night in late spring. The light from the lamp at the corner created harsh shadows between the concrete pillars supporting the building, this overhang. Shadows that seemed deeper and more real than the light itself. I walked toward the bathroom entrance, my footsteps echoing across the empty parking area. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed and flickered. The bathroom was immaculate, too immaculate, not a speck of dust. No graffiti on the stalls, no water pooled on the floor. It looked like no one had ever used it. Like it was a stage set built to replicate a bathroom rather than an actual place where human functions occurred. I finished quickly and returned to my car. The parking area had changed. I know that sounds insane. I know how it sounds when I say that. But when I walked back out into the terrible yellow light of that lamp, the world was different. The quality of the darkness beyond the rest area had transformed. It wasn't the normal darkness of a desert night anymore. It was thicker. It moved. Shadows weren't just the absence of light. They seemed to have substance and intention. They pressed against the edge of the parking area like something alive that knew I was there. I got in my car and locked the doors immediately. My hands were shaking as I turned the key. The engine started. I reversed and pulled back toward the highway entrance. The meter on the exit ramp read the same direction I'd come from. I took it, accelerating quickly, eager to get back on the main stretch of road where at least the road was clear and I could see ahead. But the highway I returned to wasn't the one I left. That's when the real terror started. The horror that I still can to fully articulate even 3 years later. The road was still a highway. It had lanes and markings and a sound under my tires like asphalt. But it was wrong. The perspective was twisted somehow. The horizon seemed too far away, or too close, both at the same time. Like looking at something through water that was being poured in multiple directions simultaneously. And there were headlights now. Far ahead, in the distance. 2 distant glow spots like eyes watching me approach. They were stationary, just sitting there on the road, miles away, not moving, waiting. I had to slow down to make sure I was reading the road correctly. My speedometer kept creeping up despite my foot barely touching the accelerator. The car seemed to want to move forward, faster, toward those distant lights. I pumped the brakes. Hard. The car lurched and slowed. The headlights ahead remained exactly the same distance away. I couldn't get closer to them. I couldn't seem to create any additional distance between myself and the car ahead, no matter what I did. That is when I noticed the odometer. The trip meter, which should have been tracking my distance from the rest area, had reset. It showed 0 miles, yet according to my watch, I'd been driving for 6 minutes. If I was maintaining even a modest speed of 30 miles per hour, I should have traveled 3 miles. But the meter insisted I'd gone nowhere. The fear transformed into something primal then, the kind of fear that doesn't come from thinking about scary things. The kind that comes from your nervous system recognizing that something fundamental about reality has broken. That you are in a place that doesn't follow normal rules. That you are trapped in a way you don't have words for. I took the next exit. There wasn't really an exit. There was just a road that appeared to my right, and my hands turned the wheel and followed it. I didn't remember deciding to do this. It just happened, like my body understood the danger better than my conscious mind. This new road was smaller, 2 lanes instead of 4. No center line, just asphalt vanishing into darkness in both directions. I followed it because I couldn't think of any other option. The headlights behind me had turned to follow. Those distant, unwavering eyes. Minutes passed, or hours. Time felt different now, measured, the way time is measured in dreams or nightmares. Every moment lasted forever and no time seemed to have passed at all. Then I saw the town. A small Nevada town materialized at the edge of my headlights. The kind of place that died sometime in the 1980s and never bothered to clean up. Storefronts with boarded windows. A gas station with pumps that had to be decades old. A diner with a sign that read simply, "Food," in red letters that had faded to dark rust. I was moving so slowly that I could observe every detail. Every broken window. Every crack in the pavement. Every way nature was slowly reclaiming what humans had abandoned. And everywhere, in every window, In every dark doorway, there was movement. Not clear movement, just shadows shifting and reforming. Things that were almost shapes, almost figures, almost watching. My car rolled to a complete stop on its own. I didn't apply the brakes. I didn't take my foot off the accelerator. The vehicle simply slowed and stopped, as if it had come to a decision. In the quiet of the stopped car, I heard something. A sound that took me several seconds to identify because it had no business existing in that place. A phone ringing. My phone, sitting in the cup holder between the seats. The screen was dark. It had no signal out here. It hadn't rung all day despite being turned on. But it was ringing now. I didn't answer. It rang and rang and rang. 7 times, 14 times, 20 times. The sound was normal and familiar and utterly horrifying because nothing in that moment should have been normal. The sound made the wrongness of the place more obvious by contrast. Then it stopped. The moment the ringing ceased, everything changed again. The town was gone. The window-bound shadows had evaporated. My car was moving forward at highway speed on the interstate, and I was accelerating. 80 miles per hour, 90. My foot was pressing the pedal down and I couldn't get it to stop. The engine was screaming. The road was clear ahead. No headlights, no distant eyes, just an empty road. I jerked the key out of the ignition. The car coasted to a stop over the next 30 seconds. I sat gasping, my hands numb, my heart throwing itself against my ribs like something trapped. When I could breathe again, I tried to piece together what had just happened. How much of it was real? How much was exhaustion and highway hypnosis and my tired mind creating horror from nothing? That's what I wanted to believe. But I started the car again with shaking hands, and I noticed something on the dashboard. The odometer had advanced. It showed that I'd driven 234 miles from when I entered the weird section of road. 234 miles. That matched approximately with how far I would have traveled in the hours I lost. Hours I couldn't account for. Hours that were gone. I drove for another 2 hours without incident. Normal traffic appeared. Semis. A few other cars. The landscape gradually transformed from high desert to rolling hills to the beginning of Sierra Nevada foothills. The sun rose somewhere behind the mountains. The world became normal again. I made it to Barstow and checked into a motel called the Starlight. The clock said it was 7 in the morning. The clerk barely glanced at me. I was just another road-weary traveler. Nothing remarkable. I didn't tell him that I'd just driven through something that existed outside of normal space. I didn't tell him that 200 miles of my journey had seemed to take place in dimensions where time worked differently. I slept for 14 hours. But I didn't dream. That was the strangest part. No dreams at all. Just blank nothingness. Like my mind had been switched off completely. Like something had needed me to stop thinking for a while. When I woke up, it was late evening. I checked my phone. There was a message. Just one. From an unknown number. The message was text only. It said, "Thank you for going through. We've been studying your kind for much longer than your kind has suspected. The highway is a border. You crossed it and came back. Most who crossed on to come back the same way. You were useful. You proved something important." I deleted the message immediately, but I never stopped thinking about what that meant. Never stopped wondering what came back the same way implied. Never stopped questioning whether the person sitting in my apartment right now, writing this account at 3 in the morning because I can't sleep anymore, is actually the same person who checked into the Starlight Motel in Barstow. The creeping terror hasn't left me, and sometimes, late at night, I stand near the window and look at my car parked on the street below. I study the odometer reading, which I check obsessively, and I wonder when the highway will call me back, because something in my bones knows that it will. Something has marked me. Something is patient and watching. The terrifying, horrifying truth I've come to accept is that there are routes through Nevada that don't appear on any map. There are stretches of highway where the normal rules of time and space have been negotiated differently. And somewhere out there, something exists that has been studying humanity from roads that exist between our roads. I haven't driven back to Nevada in 3 years. They avoided every highway that connects to Interstate 40. And they absolutely, completely avoided the stretch between mile markers 305 and 325. Because I think if I went back, I wouldn't come back the same way. I don't think I could come back at all. And deep down, in the part of my mind that stays awake at 3 in the morning, I'm not sure that matters. I'm not sure I came back the first time. I'm not sure the person typing this confession into the darkness is the same person who pulled out of that rest area all those years ago. Sometimes I wonder if I've been dead the entire time since mile marker 312. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still driving on that highway, and this whole normal life has just been a hallucination. A dream that something very old and very patient has been allowing me to experience before I finally understand the truth. The creeping darkness in the back of my mind whispers that the highway ISN to finish with me. That it has just been waiting, watching, building its hunger for the next time I drive alone through the empty desert. And honestly, after everything I've experienced, I'm not sure how much longer I can resist the urge to get in my car and go back. The highway is calling, and I am not certain I could keep ignoring it forever. Blank, _ blank. If you read driving through Nevada late at night and you pass a mile marker that seems strange, if the road ahead starts to feel wrong, if you realize you've seen another car that's headlights in far too long, pull into the next rest area and wait until daylight. Dawn, to keep driving. Dawn, to answer your phone if it rings. And whatever you do, dawn, to acknowledge the distant headlights that may be following you through the darkness. Some highways were never meant to be traveled alone. Story 3. Exit that wasn't to there. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened on Route 40. There are places in this country that exist in the wrong way. Places that shouldn't be there. And once you find them, they never quite let you go. It started 3 weeks ago, driving through Nevada at 2 in the morning. I am a long-haul trucker, 47 years old, 20 years on the road. I've seen every highway, every forgotten town, every stretch of darkness between cities. I thought I knew what fear was. I thought I'd seen everything the night could throw at me. I was wrong. The exit appeared at mile marker 286. That is the disturbing part. I've driven Route 40 1,000 times. There is no exit at mile marker 286. Just empty desert, sagebrush, and darkness stretching forever in both directions. But that night, there it was. A green sign reflecting my headlights. No name, no number, just an arrow pointing right. I didn't take it. I kept driving, but something changed. The road felt wrong. The painted lines seemed dimmer. The gentle curve I knew by heart was bending differently, turning in ways I didn't remember. My hands were steady on the wheel, but the highway was shifting, rotating, like something beneath the asphalt was breathing. The shadows alongside the road grew thicker, darker, as if the desert itself was closing in. I checked my GPS. The screen showed nothing, not lost signal, nothing, just a gray void where the map should be. My phone displayed no bars, no carrier, just the time frozen at 2:13 a.m. The clock on my dashboard disagreed. It read 2:13 a.m. too, but the seconds weren't moving. That's when I noticed the mile markers. 286, then 286 again, then 286 a third time. The terrifying realization hit me like ice water. I wasn't moving forward. The road was looping, carrying me in circles, except circles done to feel straight. The highway stretched ahead perfectly linear, disappearing into darkness. But somehow I was returning to the same point over and over. I pressed harder on the gas, 75 miles per hour, 80. The engine roared, wheels eating up asphalt, but mile marker 286 appeared again. And again, and again. Then I saw the buildings. They materialized from the darkness like photographs developing. A gas station, a diner, a small motel with a flickering neon sign. All of them old, weathered, from an era that ended decades ago. Chrome and tile, Americana from the 1950s, perfectly preserved but completely wrong. The gas pumps were ancient, the prices impossibly low, and every single window was dark except one. The diner, this corner booth glowed with warm yellow light. I should have kept driving. Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, to push through whatever nightmare had swallowed this stretch of highway. But I'd been seeing mile marker 286 for what felt like hours. My fuel gauge was dropping, and that single lit window promised answers, or at least an end to the eerie repetition. I pulled over. The moment my truck stopped, the engine died. Not sputtered, not coughed, just stopped, like someone had reached inside and switched it off. The headlights went dark. The dashboard lights faded. The only illumination came from that diner window, warm and inviting and completely horrifying. Silence pressed against my ears. The desert should be full of sounds. Wind, insects, the tick of cooling metal. But there was nothing, just suffocating quiet, heavy as water, drowning everything. I sat in the darkness and tried to restart the engine. The key turned uselessly. Click, click, click. Nothing. My phone remained frozen at 2:13 a.m. My watch had stopped too. Time itself had abandoned this place. The diner waited. I climbed out of the cab. The air felt thick, viscous, like moving through something that wasn't quite atmosphere. My boots hit pavement that seemed too solid, too real. Every footstep echoed wrong, bouncing back from surfaces that shouldn't exist. Closer now, I could see through the diner's window. The corner booth held a figure, just sitting there, motionless, facing away from me. Dark clothes, dark hair, completely still in that pool of yellow light. The diner, this door wasn't locked. It swung open silently. No bell, no creak, just smooth, unsettling silence. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and pie and something underneath. Something chemical and old and deeply wrong. The checkered floor gleamed. The chrome counter sparkled. Everything was perfect. Museum perfect. Horror movie perfect. The figure in the booth didn't move. I walked closer, my shadow stretching across the floor in the yellow light. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every step felt like walking deeper into something I'd never escape. When I reached the booth, I looked down. It was me, the figure sitting there, staring at the wall, wearing my clothes, with my face, with my exact scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood accident. Me, but the eyes were wrong. Empty, like looking at a photograph of myself that had been left in the sun too long, faded and distant and not quite right. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, just sat there, holding a coffee cup that wasn't steaming, staring at nothing. I stumbled backward. My boot caught the edge of a table. Metal screeched against tile. The sound shattered that suffocating silence like glass breaking, and the thing with my face turned its head. Not quickly, slowly, mechanically, rotating with grinding precision until those empty eyes fixed on mine. The mouth moved, not speaking, just opening wider and wider and wider, unhinging like a snake, revealing darkness inside that went deeper than any throat should go. I ran. The door burst open under my weight. The night swallowed me. I sprinted toward my truck, legs pumping, lungs burning, terror clawing at my back. Behind me, I heard footsteps, steady, unhurried, matching my pace exactly but never quite catching up. My truck door hung open. I threw myself inside, yanked it shut, twisted the key with shaking hands. The engine roared to life. I didn't question it. I slammed the accelerator to the floor. Tires screamed, rubber burned. The truck lurched forward, away from that diner, away from that thing wearing my face, back onto the highway that had trapped me. Mile marker 286 flashed past, then 287, then 288. The numbers were climbing. The GPS flickered back to life. My phone showed 2:47 a.m., the seconds ticking forward normally. The road felt right again. Proper curves, proper distance. The desert opened up around me, vast and empty and blessedly normal. I drove for 6 straight hours. Didn't stop until I hit Reno. Didn't sleep until I checked into a motel with bright lights and traffic sounds and other people around me. That was 3 weeks ago. Last night, driving through Kansas, I saw another exit that shouldn't exist. Mile marker 423. No name, no number, just an arrow pointing right. I kept driving, but the road started curving differently than I remembered. The mile markers began repeating, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, I know there was another diner waiting. Another booth, another version of me sitting in yellow light, getting ready to turn around. Because here is what I figured out. That thing I saw wasn't the ghost. It wasn't the demon. It was a possibility. A version of me that took that exit months ago, or years ago, or in some timeline I can. Do you understand? And it is still there, waiting, sitting in that booth. They were all still there. Every version of every driver who found those exits. Trapped in their own personal loops. In diners and motels and gas stations that exist between the miles. In the spaces where the highway forgets what it is supposed to be. The terrifying part? I am starting to see more of them. Different exits, different mile markers. All over the country. Places that pull at me. That whisper promises of rest, of answers, of finally understanding what is happening. And I am so tired. 20 years on the road. 20 years of the same highways, the same darkness, the same endless miles. Part of me wonders if taking one of those exits would be so bad. If sitting in that booth, with that cup of coffee that never gets cold, staring at that wall forever, might actually be peaceful. The road curves ahead. I don't remember this turn, but my hands follow it anyway, steering into darkness that feels thicker than it should, toward mile markers I've seen before, toward exits that weren't there yesterday but are waiting for me now. I need you to understand something. If you drive the highways at night, if you alone on those long stretches between cities where the darkness feels alive, pay attention to the exits. Check your mile markers. Know your route. Because somewhere out there, on roads that exist in the wrong way, there are places waiting. Diners with lights in single windows. Motels with vacancy signs that never turn off. Gas stations where the pumps still work but the fuel goes nowhere. And in every one of them, there is someone sitting in the darkness. Someone who looks familiar. Someone who took a turn they didn't remember taking. Who followed a road that curved wrong. Who thought they could escape but learned too late that some exits don't lead anywhere except deeper. The GPS just went dark. The clock stopped at 2:13 a.m. Mile marker 286 is coming up again. I can feel it. And this time, I think I'm going to stop. Story 4. Gas station between towns. Have you ever driven so long that the highway starts to feel like it is breathing? That the white lines aren't painted anymore but carved into something alive? I have. And I learned that some roads don't want you to leave. The fuel light had been glowing for 20 miles. 20 miles of nothing but darkness pressing against my windshield like it was trying to get in. I was driving through Nevada, taking the back road to avoid traffic, and my phone had lost signal an hour ago. The last town was a memory. The next one was a hope. And then, right when the needle touched empty, I saw it. A gas station, just sitting there in the middle of absolute nowhere. No sign, no name, just a single flickering light above 2 old pumps and a small building that looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. The sight should have been a relief. Instead, something cold moved through my chest, something that felt like warning. But I was out of choices. The engine was already coughing. I pulled in slowly. Gravel crunched under my tires, loud in the horrifying silence. When I turned off the ignition, the quiet that followed was wrong. Not peaceful, hungry. I sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, listening. No wind, no insects, no distant hum of the highway. Just nothing, pressing against my ears until they rang. The building ahead was dark except for one window. Yellow light seeped out, thick and oily, like something that had been underground too long. The pumps looked ancient, the kind with rolling numbers instead of digital displays. Rust ate at their edges, and above them, that single light swung slightly, even though there was no breeze. I got up. The air smelled wrong, metallic, sweet, like old pennies left in sugar water. My footsteps seemed too loud. Each one echoed weirdly, like the ground beneath wasn't quite solid. I reached for the pump handle and froze. It was warm, not sun warm, body warm. I almost got back in my car right then. Almost. The pump clicked on before I touched anything. The numbers started rolling. Fuel poured into my tank with a wet, gulping sound that made my skin crawl. I watched the numbers climb, unable to look away, feeling like something was watching me watch them. That's when I noticed the handprints on my car. Dozens of them, small ones, child-sized, pressed into the dust covering my doors and windows. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of that. They were everywhere now, like invisible children had surrounded my vehicle while I stood there, frozen. The building, its door opened. No one came out. It just swung inward, revealing deeper darkness and that sick yellow light somewhere inside. A sound drifted out. Not quite music, not quite voices. Something between the two that made my teeth ache. The pump clicked off. Full tank, but I hadn't prepaid. Hadn't even gone inside. I should have left, started the car and driven until the sun came up or the gas ran out again, whichever came first. But something pulled at me. That same horrible curiosity that makes you look at accidents on the highway. That makes you read the disturbing news, will haunt you. I walked toward the open door. Each step felt like moving through water. The air grew thicker, heavier, until breathing took effort. The smell got stronger. Underneath the metal and sweetness, something else. Something rotting. Inside was a single room. Shelves lined the walls, but they were empty except for dust and things that might have been cans once. Their labels so faded they were just colored smears. A counter stood in the back. Behind it, more darkness. And in that darkness, movement. Hello. My voice sounded flat, dead, like the room swallowed it before it could properly form. The movement stopped. Then a shape stepped into the yellow light. It wore the shape of a man, an old one, with skin like paper left too long in the sun. But his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too aware. They reflected the light like an animal, his eyes shining with something that wasn't quite color. He smiled. His teeth were perfect, too perfect, white and even and new, like they'd been installed yesterday in a mouth that was 1,000 years old. Fuel is paid for, he said. His voice was dust and static. You can go, but I couldn't to move because I'd seen what was behind him now, in that deeper darkness. Photographs, hundreds of them, pinned to the wall, and in every single one, a car, different makes, different models, different decades, all parked exactly where mine was now, all covered in the same small handprints. Where are the children? The question fell out of me before I could stop it. His smile widened, impossibly wide, wider than any mouth should go. There are no children here, he said. There haven't been children here for a very long time. He was right. Whatever made those prints wasn't children. Not anymore. The photographs rippled, all at once, like something had moved behind them. And I realized they weren't just pictures. They were windows, and on the other side, in each one, movement. Shadows shifting inside parked cars. Shapes pressed against windows, watching, waiting. Some people, the old man said, his voice coming from everywhere now, they see our sign. They know to avoid this place. They push on, risk running dry, take their chances with the dark road. But some people, they don't. They see the warning. They just see salvation. They pull in. They take our fuel. And fuel costs something here. Always has. The handprints on my car began to move, sliding across the windows. Small fingers spreading, pressing, like they were feeling for a way inside. The thing about children, he continued, and his eyes were so bright now they hurt to look at, is they remember how to be hungry. Really hungry. Hungry enough to last forever. Hungry enough to wait. This place, it collects that hunger, stores it, feeds it, and every so often, that hunger needs something fresh. I ran, out the door, across the gravel that seemed to grab at my feet, toward my car. The handprints scattered like cockroaches from light, disappearing into the shadows beneath my vehicle. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. The engine started. Thank God, it started. I floored it. Gravel sprayed. The gas station shrank in my mirror, that yellow light getting smaller, dimmer. The old man stood in the doorway, still smiling his too wide smile, watching me go. The road stretched ahead, dark, empty, exactly the same as before. I drove for hours, watching the fuel gauge, watching it drop, slowly, steadily, normal. Dawn came eventually, gray first, then pink, then gold. Beautiful and normal and real. I found a town, a real one, with a real gas station that had a name and lights and a teenager behind the counter playing on his phone. I pulled in on fumes. When I got out to pump, I noticed something. There, in the dust still coating my car, one small handprint, just one, on the driver's side window, right next to where my head had been while I drove through the night. And underneath it, written in the dust in a child, just uneven letters. See you next time. I cleaned my car, every inch, obsessively. But here, it's the thing about some kinds of dirt. Some kinds never really come off, because they re not on the surface. They re deeper, in the paint, in the metal, in you. It's been 3 weeks. My car runs fine, better than fine. The fuel economy is incredible. I'm getting twice the mileage I should. 3 times, maybe, like that tank is bottomless. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it. Small hands, patting against my windows. Gentle, patient, persistent. And yesterday, my fuel light came on. For the first time since that night. Glowing in the dash like a tiny amber eye. I know what it means. The fuel is running out. Not the gas. Something else. Something that station put in my tank. Some kind of payment that is coming due. Tonight, I have to drive across Nevada again. Same route. I have to, because I checked my GPS. Pulled up every map I could find. Satellite, Street View, historical records. There's no gas station where I stopped that night. Not on any map. Not in any database. Just empty desert. But I know I'll see it again. Right when the fuel warning comes on. Right when I'm desperate. Right when I have no choice but to pull in. And I know those small hands will be waiting. Those hungry, patient things that used to be children. That remember what it was like to need, to want, to hunger, the gas station between towns. It appears exactly when you need it to. And once you stop there, once you take what it offers, you can never really leave. The road remembers. The darkness remembers. And somewhere out there in the Nevada night, so do they. Story 5, Road that Refused to End. I stopped counting miles after the odometer hit 312, because that is when I realized the highway signs were repeating themselves. Not similar signs, the exact same signs, same rust patterns, same bullet holes, same faded white letters that read, "Next services 47 miles," over and over again. It started 6 hours ago when I took what I thought was a shortcut through Nevada, this backcountry, to avoid traffic on Interstate 80. My GPS had died 20 minutes into the detour, but I figured I'd just follow Route 318 north until I hit something recognizable. I am a long-haul trucker. I've driven every forgotten stretch of asphalt in the American West. I'd done to get lost. But this road was different. This road was wrong. The sun had been setting when I first noticed the strangeness. The same crooked Joshua tree kept appearing on my right side every 10 miles or so. I told myself it was just the desert playing tricks, that all Joshua trees look alike when you re-exhausted. But then I saw the dead coyote, flattened on the shoulder, one leg pointing skyward at an unnatural angle. I passed it. Then 20 minutes later, I passed it again. Same coyote, same position, same flies circling in the dimming light. That is when the fear started crawling up my spine like cold fingers. I pressed harder on the accelerator. My truck, its engine roared, pushing 70, then 80 miles per hour. The white dashed lines blurred into a solid stream, but nothing changed. The landscape remained identical. Same rocky outcroppings, same patches of scrub brush, same mountains in the distance that never got closer or farther away. The road stretched endlessly forward and endlessly behind, and I was trapped in the middle of it, moving but going nowhere. The sky had turned that deep purple color that comes right before true darkness when I saw the abandoned motel. It squatted 50 yards off the highway, a single-story rectangle of peeling turquoise paint and broken windows. A neon sign flickered weakly. Dessert Rest Inn, vacancy. Most of the letters were dark, leaving only ESERT and IN glowing in sick pink light. I should have kept driving. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my hands on the wheel and my foot on the gas. But I'd been driving for 6 hours on this impossible road, and my fuel gauge was dropping toward empty. The truck needed rest. I needed rest. I needed to understand what was happening to me. I pulled into the motel, this gravel parking lot. The sound of my tires crunching over stones was unnaturally loud in the silence. No other vehicles. No lights in any windows. No sounds of life at all. Just that flickering neon sign and the wind pushing tumbleweeds across the empty lot. The motel office door hung half open. Inside, a small bell sat on a dust-covered counter. I rang it. The sound echoed through the building, sharp and intrusive. Nobody came. I rang it again. Still nothing. Hello? My voice sounded strange, swallowed by the thick desert air. Behind the counter, I could see a pegboard with room keys hanging from hooks. Room 7 was missing its key. I looked down the row of identical doors facing the parking lot. 6 rooms with their curtains drawn. Then room 7, its door standing slightly ajar. A horrifying realization settled over me like a burial shroud. Someone was expecting me. I backed away from the office, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was wrong. Everything about this place felt wrong. I needed to get back in my truck and keep driving, even if the road went nowhere. Staying here felt worse than being trapped in motion. But when I turned back toward my truck, it was gone. The parking lot stretched empty before me. Just cracked asphalt and painted parking lines fading into ghost outlines. My 18-wheeler had vanished completely, as if it had never existed at all. Panic seized my chest. I ran to where I deparked, searching for tire tracks, oil stains, any evidence that my truck had been real. Nothing. The ground showed no disturbance. I spun in circles, scanning the highway, the desert beyond, the darkening sky. Empty. Everything was empty, except for room 7, with its door hanging open like a mouth waiting to swallow me. I had no choice. Night was falling fast, and the desert gets cold after sunset. Staying outside meant exposure, possibly death. At least the room offered shelter. I told myself this as I walked toward that open door, my footsteps sounding too loud on the concrete walkway. The room was small and surprisingly clean. A double bed with a faded floral bedspread. A nightstand with a lamp that actually worked when I pulled the chain. A small television on a dresser. Everything covered in a thin layer of dust but otherwise normal. Ordinary. That ordinariness felt more disturbing than if the room had been filled with shadows and decay. I closed the door and locked it. Then I pushed the dresser in front of the door for good measure. The window had curtains so thick no light penetrated them. I left them closed, not wanting to see what might be looking back at me from the darkness outside. The television had only one channel. Static, mostly, but occasionally images would flicker through. Highway signs, empty roads, the same stretches of desert I'd been driving through. And sometimes, just for a second, I'd see my own truck driving past, my own face visible through the windshield, eyes wide with fear, mouth open as if screaming. I turned off the television. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no distant traffic sounds, no creaking of the buildings settling. Just silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums like water pressure. That's when I heard the footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, moving along the walkway from room 6 toward my door. The sound of boots on concrete. Step, step, step. They stopped directly outside room 7. I held my breath. The doorknob turned slowly, testing the lock. Finding it secured, whatever was outside paused. Then I heard it move to the window. A shadow appeared at the edge of the curtains. Something tall and thin stood just beyond the glass, perfectly still, watching. Hours passed. The shadow never moved. I sat on the bed with my back against the wall, staring at that window, waiting for something to happen. My watch had stopped at 8:47. When I checked my phone, it was dead despite being fully charged when I pulled into the parking lot. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear. My eyelids grew heavy. I fought against sleep, knowing something terrible would happen if I let my guard down. But the body has limits. Consciousness slipped away despite my resistance. I dreamed of driving, endless driving on an endless road. But in the dream, I could see other vehicles. Dozens of them, hundreds, cars and trucks from different eras, all moving in the same direction, all trying to find the end of the highway. And I understood with dream logic certainty that we were all trapped here. Every driver who had ever taken this wrong turn, circling forever through the same stretch of nothing, growing more desperate with each repeated mile. When I woke, pale morning light filtered through gaps in the curtains. The shadow was gone. I pushed the dresser aside and opened the door carefully. My truck sat in the parking lot exactly where I left it. Relief flooded through me. It had all been some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination. I'd been driving too long, got confused, imagined things in the twilight. Now, in daylight, everything was back to normal. I practically ran to my truck, yanked open the door, and climbed inside. The keys were in the ignition. I turned them. The engine roared to life. I threw the transmission into gear and peeled out of that motel parking lot, spraying gravel behind me. The highway stretched ahead, and I merged onto it going 60 miles per hour, then 70, desperate to put distance between myself and the desert rest inn. But 15 minutes later, I saw the motel again. Same building, same flickering neon sign, same empty parking lot. I kept driving. 30 minutes later, there it was again. An hour later, again. The horrifying truth crystallized in my mind. The road wasn't repeating. I was, somehow, I'd become part of a loop, cycling through the same stretch of highway over and over. The motel was a checkpoint, a marker showing me I had completed another circuit. But a circuit to where? And for what purpose? I started experimenting. I tried driving in reverse. The road simply reconfigured itself, still pulling me forward through the same landmarks. I tried stopping and refusing to move. After an hour, my truck's engine started itself, and my foot pressed the accelerator without my conscious control. My body was no longer entirely my own. That is when I noticed the other drivers. They appeared suddenly in my rearview mirror or past me going the opposite direction. Other vehicles from other times. A rusted pickup from the 1950s. A muscle car from the 1970s. A minivan from the 1990s. Each driver wore the same expression I must have been wearing. Wide-eyed terror mixed with exhausted resignation. We were all trapped here, all caught in the same impossible loop. And as I watched one of those cars in my mirror, I saw it begin to fade. Not slowly, but all at once, like a television being switched off. The driver, his face locked in a silent scream as his vehicle and body dissolved into nothing. That's what happens when you stop fighting, when you accept the road. It consumes you completely. I've been driving for 3 days now, or maybe 3 weeks, or 3 years. Time has lost all meaning on this highway that refuses to end. My fuel gauge never drops below a quarter tank. My body never gets hungry or thirsty, though I remember what those feelings were like. The sun rises and sets, but it might be the same sunrise and sunset repeating infinitely. Sometimes I see new drivers enter the loop. Their faces still hold hope, confusion, the belief that they can find their way out. I want to warn them. I want to explain what is happening, but the road doesn't allow communication. We trapped in our own vehicles, our own personal hells, circling the same patch of cursed Nevada desert forever. The worst part, ISN, the repetition or the isolation. It's the slow realization that this highway exists outside normal reality. We're not in the world anymore. We're in something else. Something that wears the world's face but operates by different rules. Darker rules. And the road just keeps going, stretching through an endless night that occasionally pretends to be day. I'm writing this with the last bit of wool I have left. My hands still obey me, barely, but I can feel the road claiming more of my control with each passing mile. Soon, I'll just be another ghost driver, circling forever, another piece of the machine that powers this impossible highway. If you driving through Nevada and see a detour off Interstate 80, take it. If your GPS dies and you see Route 318 stretching empty before you, turn around. If you see a trucker in a Peterbilt with wild eyes and terror written across his face, wave. To acknowledge him. Because that is me. That's what they become. A warning that nobody will heed. The road goes on forever. And I go on with it. Story 6. An exit with no destination. The bleeding started 3 exits back, but I didn't pull over until I saw the sign for Ashton Falls. I'd been driving for 16 hours straight, pushing through exhaustion and 3 energy drinks that tasted like battery acid. My hands were cramping on the wheel, and somewhere around the Colorado-Kansas border, my nose had started bleeding. Not a trickle, a steady flow that soaked through tissue after tissue until the passenger seat looked like a crime scene. The scary part wasn't the blood itself. It was that I felt fine. No pain, no dizziness, just this disturbing sense that my body was leaking out of me 1 drop at a time. The sign names a town I'd never heard of. Turning off feels easier than staying on the road. Ashton Falls, population 1,847. The green reflective letters glowed in my headlights, and beneath them, in smaller text, historic downtown, food, lodging. The exit ramp curved away into darkness, and something about it felt like relief, like permission to finally stop. I took it without thinking, my brain too fogged with exhaustion to question why a town of less than 2,000 people would have an exit on Interstate 70. The bleeding stopped the moment my tires left the highway. I noticed it immediately. The tissue pressed against my nose came away clean. I checked my face in the rearview mirror, expecting to see blood smeared across my upper lip, but my skin was spotless. Even the tissues in the passenger seat had vanished, leaving behind nothing but clean upholstery. My heart kicked up a notch, that first spike of fear cutting through the exhaustion. That wasn't normal. That wasn't possible. The exit ramp stretched longer than it should have, winding through empty fields where nothing grew. No grass, no weeds, just bare dirt that looked gray in my headlights. The road surface changed from smooth asphalt to rough concrete, then to something that felt like packed earth, my tires crunching over loose gravel that sent small stones pinging against the undercarriage. I should have turned around. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to flip a U-turn and get back on the highway. But the exhaustion was like a weight pressing down on my shoulders, and the thought of driving another 100 miles to the next town felt impossible. I needed sleep. I needed to stop. I needed to believe that Ashton Falls was real and normal and exactly what the sign promised. The town appeared suddenly, materializing out of the darkness like someone had thrown a switch. 1 second there was nothing but empty road, and the next I was rolling past a wooden sign that said, "Welcome to Ashton Falls," where everyone knows your name. Streetlights cast pools of sickly yellow light across empty sidewalks. The buildings were old, the kind of mom and pop shops you see in small Kansas towns, but something about them felt wrong. The windows were too dark, the doors too still. Everything looked like a photograph of a town rather than an actual place where people live. I drove slowly down Main Street, searching for any sign of life. A motel, a gas station, even a house with lights on. The clock on my dashboard said it was just past midnight, late but not so late that an entire town should be completely dead. But every building I passed was dark and silent, and the creepy feeling that had started as a whisper was now shouting in my head. Then I saw the diner. The Nightingale Cafe sat on the corner of Main and 4th, its neon sign buzzing and flickering in the darkness. Through the windows I could see lights, tables, even what looked like a few customers sitting in booths. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I almost laughed. People, normal people in a normal diner. I pulled into the parking lot and killed my engine, sitting for a moment in the sudden silence. That's when I noticed the cars around me were all the same model. Ford Taurus sedans, at least a dozen of them, all dark blue. All parked in perfect rows. Same year, same color, same license plate configuration. Not identical plates, but the same format, the same worn edges, like they'd all been issued at the same time from the same place. The fear was back, cold and sharp in my chest. I reached for my phone to check the GPS, to see exactly where I was, but the screen was black. Dead battery, even though it had been at 70% when I took the exit. I tried to restart it, but nothing happened, just dead weight in my hand. The diner door opened, and a woman stepped out onto the sidewalk. She was young, maybe 30, dressed in waitress clothes from another era. Not vintage fashion, but actual old clothes, the kind my grandmother might have worn in the 60s. She waved at me, smiling, gesturing for me to come inside. Every horror movie I'd ever seen told me not to go in. But the alternative was sitting alone in my car in this disturbing parking lot full of identical vehicles, or driving back through that endless exit ramp in the dark. The diner at least had lights and people and the promise of coffee and answers. I got out of the car, my legs stiff from driving, and walked toward the door. The woman's smile never wavered as I approached. It was too wide, too fixed, like it had been painted on her face. Up close I could see that her eyes didn't quite match the smile, that they were distant and glassy, like someone on heavy medication or in shock. Inside, the diner was frozen in time. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with round stools, a jukebox in the corner playing songs I almost recognized but didn't quite place. The customers I'd seen through the window were sitting exactly as they had been, not eating, not drinking, just sitting with their hands folded on the tables in front of them. 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, all wearing the same distant expression as the waitress. They all turned to look at me when I entered, moving in perfect synchronization, their heads rotating at the exact same speed. The terrifying smile spread across all their faces simultaneously. I froze in the doorway, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run. But the waitress was behind me now, blocking my exit, still smiling that horrible smile. She gestured toward an empty booth, and I found myself moving toward it, my body operating on autopilot while my mind gibbered in fear. The menu on the table was sticky with something that wasn't tea syrup, the pages yellow with age. Every item was the same, the special. No description, no price, just those 2 words repeated down the page in different sections. Breakfast special, lunch special, dinner special, all the same. One of the customers stood up from his booth and walked toward me. Middle-aged guy, wearing a business suit that had gone out of style decades ago. He moved stiffly, mechanically, like his joints needed oil. When he reached my table, he leaned down, and I could smell something coming off him. Something like old meat and chemical preservatives. He opened his mouth, and instead of words, I heard my own voice. My exact voice, speaking words I said earlier that day. I need to stop. I can't drive anymore. I just need to rest. The other customers stood up, all moving in that same unsettling synchronization. They surrounded my booth, and they all opened their mouths, and they all spoke in my voice, repeating different things I said over the past 16 hours. Private thoughts I spoken aloud to myself while driving. Lyrics I sung along with the radio. Even things I couldn't remember saying, conversations I must have had in gas stations or rest stops. Words I forgotten the moment they left my mouth. The chilling realization hit me like a physical blow. They were collectors. The town was a trap. A net spread across this exit to catch exhausted drivers. And these things wearing human skin were gathering voices, gathering lives, adding them to some horrifying collection. I tried to stand, to push past them and run, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked down and saw that my feet were sinking into the floor, the linoleum going soft and liquid, swallowing my shoes. The booth was sinking too, the vinyl going viscous and sticky, holding me in place while the collectors crowded closer. The waitress appeared beside the table, still smiling, carrying a plate with a dome-shaped cover. She set it down in front of me with exaggerated ceremony, then lifted the cover with a flourish. On the plate was a severed hand. My hand. I could see my own watch on the wrist, the scar on the thumb from a childhood accident. But my hands were still attached to my arms, still gripping the edge of the table. I looked back at the plate, and now there were 2 hands. Then 3, each one a perfect copy, identical down to the smallest detail. The collectors leaned in closer, their mouths opening wider than mouths should open, and I could see down their throats into darkness that went on forever. They began to speak again, but this time in unison, their combined voices creating a horrible harmony. Welcome to Ashton Falls. Everyone knows your name. Everyone knows your voice. Everyone knows your story. And now you all know ours. The jukebox in the corner switched songs, and I recognized the tune immediately. It was the song I'd been humming 3 exits back, before my nose started bleeding. But the lyrics were different now, changed to describe what was happening to me in this moment, like the town was writing my story in real time and playing it back for its own amusement. I felt myself beginning to split, to divide, like a cell under a microscope. My consciousness fragmenting into pieces, each piece becoming a new copy, a new me to add to the collection. I could feel the other copies around me, other travelers who had taken this exit over the years, their identities absorbed and replicated by whatever this place was. The disturbing truth was worse than death. I wasn't going to die. I was going to become part of Ashton Falls, another collector walking through this frozen diner, speaking in stolen voices, serving the special to the next exhausted driver who saw the sign and thought turning off felt easier than staying on the road. My vision split into multiple perspectives, seeing through dozens of eyes at once. I was at my booth and behind the counter and standing by the door and sitting in every other seat. The copies of me all smiled the same terrible smile, raised their hands in the same gesture, spoke in the same stolen voice. Somewhere far away, on Interstate 70, a new driver was seeing a sign for Ashton Falls. The sign that shouldn't exist, advertising a town that wasn't on any map. They were tired, exhausted, maybe bleeding from somewhere they couldn't explain. And turning off would feel easier than staying on the road. I wanted to warn them, to scream at them to keep driving. But I had no voice anymore. Just echoes of a voice, copies of copies, replayed in an endless loop in this nightmare diner where everyone knows your name because everyone is you, has always been you, will always be you. The last thought I had that was truly mine was a question. How many other exits were there, scattered across how many highways, all leading to towns with friendly names and dark windows? How many collectors were walking through how many diners, waiting with their terrible smiles and their stolen voices? Then that thought fragmented too, splitting and dividing until I couldn't tell where I ended and the collection began, and Ashton Falls added another voice to its chorus, another story to its jukebox, another set of hands to serve the special to travelers who just wanted to rest. Story 7. Mile marker loop. I am still not entirely sure what I am anymore, and that terrifies me more than anything else could. 3 months ago, I was a completely normal person, a logistics coordinator for a distribution company. I had a mortgage, a 9-to-5 job, and a 20-minute commute through suburban traffic. I was boring in the best possible way, but then came the drive that changed everything. The drive that made me question whether I'd been alive for the last 3 months or if I died on Route 285 somewhere between Salida and Poncha Springs, Colorado, and I just experiencing an elaborate hallucination before whatever comes next. It was an ordinary Friday evening in late October. I was driving home from the Denver office, heading south through the Colorado mountains. The weather was turning. Aspens had gone that brilliant gold that only happens for a few weeks each year. The road was clear. The sky was that deep blue you only get at high altitude, and I was thinking about nothing in particular. I had the radio on, some talk station that I wasn't really listening to. I was just enjoying the drive. Those mountains have a way of clearing your head. That is when I first saw the mile marker. Mile marker 114.4. I remember it specifically because I had just been thinking about stopping for gas. And I knew there was a station at mile marker 140, which meant I had 6 more miles to go. A small detail, the kind of thing you process without really thinking about it, but I remember seeing that number displayed on the green sign as I passed it. 40 minutes later, I hadn't reached that gas station. This wasn't alarming at first. The road curves and winds through the mountains. You can maintain a constant speed. Sometimes you slow down for traffic or terrain, but I was certain I'd been driving faster than normal. The road had been clear. I spent most of the time coasting downhill, which should have made me go faster, not slower. I decided to pay closer attention to the mile markers from that point forward. The next one I saw was 1:14.5, 1 mile further than before. That made sense. I'd driven for a few more minutes. Time was passing. Distance was accumulating. This was all perfectly normal. I was just being paranoid because I was tired from a long week. But then came the unsettling part. 15 minutes after passing mile marker 1:14.5, I saw another marker. This one read 1:14.4, the same number as before, the same marker I passed 45 minutes earlier. My first thought was that I was misremembering, that I'd been confused about which number I'd seen initially, that my tired mind was playing tricks. But I was absolutely certain. The number on that green sign was 1:14.4. I passed it twice. I slowed down and checked my odometer. The trip meter showed 17 miles since I started paying attention to the markers. My regular odometer showed that I traveled the correct distance for the time elapsed. Everything on my dashboard suggested that I was moving forward normally through space and time. Yet I passed the same mile marker twice in opposite directions. The creeping sensation started then. That cold feeling in the base of your skull that tells your nervous system something is fundamentally wrong. The kind of fear that doesn't come from thinking about scary things in the abstract. The kind that comes from your body recognizing that reality is behaving in impossible ways. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The road stretched ahead of me, beautiful and terrible. The mountains loomed on both sides, their peaks turning orange in the setting sun. The aspens were starting to look less beautiful and more like they were closing in. Trees on both sides of the road, pressed close enough that I could almost reach out the window and touch them. The radio started to glitch. It wasn't gradual. One moment I was hearing a discussion about local news. The next moment, nothing but static. I twisted the dial. Every station was the same. Pure, crackling white noise. Some kind of interference, I told myself. The mountains did that sometimes. Radio signals got bounced around by geography. Nothing sinister. Nothing to indicate that something was actually wrong. Then a voice cut through the static. A man's voice. Calm and measured. Not a normal radio voice. Something about the timbre of it was off. Like a recording of a voice. Played slightly slower than the original speed. The voice said a single sentence before dissolving back into static. You've already passed here. You're not going anywhere. I shut the radio off completely. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. The sun was sinking faster now. Or so it seemed. The light was taking on that eerie orange quality that happens right before twilight. Everything looked the same. The road, the trees, the curve of the asphalt ahead. Like I was driving through a loop. Like the landscape was repeating. And then I saw it. Mile marker 1:14.4. Again, exactly as it had been before. Same green sign, same white numbers. The exact same marker I passed an hour and a half ago. I couldn't have driven in a circle. The road was a straight highway. I'd been accelerating. I hadn't turned around. Yet somehow, impossibly, I arrived at the same location twice. The terrifying, horrifying realization hit me then. The thing that made my stomach drop and my breathing shallow. I slowed the car down deliberately and pulled off to the side of the road. The asphalt crunched under my tires as I came to a stop on the shoulder. I put the car in park and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No traffic sounds, no wind through the trees, no distant noise of civilization. Just the settling sounds of the cooling engine and my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I was alone in the mountains as the light was dying. Alone in a place where the normal rules of navigation had apparently stopped applying. I looked at my dashboard. My odometer showed I'd traveled 143 miles since leaving the Denver office. That was wrong. The actual distance between Denver and my current location should have been around 80 miles, maybe 90 accounting for my starting point in the city. I somehow logged almost twice the distance I should have. My phone had no signal, which wasn't unusual in the mountains. But when I tried to make a call anyway, the phone displayed a message I'd never seen before, service outside operational range. That wasn't a normal message. That wasn't something my phone should have been able to produce. I sat in that car for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes. The sun finished setting. The world went from orange to purple to black. The stars came out, and I realized with growing dread that I didn't recognize the constellations. Or rather, they were right, but they seemed to be positioned slightly wrong. Like a photograph that had been digitally altered just enough that something about it was disturbing without being obviously impossible. Eventually, I had to make a decision. I could sit in the car and wait for morning, hoping that daylight would bring clarity and perhaps the opportunity to flag down another driver. Or I could keep driving, keep trying to move forward, keep searching for an exit or a town or some place where people existed. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road. This time, I drove faster, 70 miles per hour, then 80. The road was empty. No other cars, no signs of life. Just the dark mountains pressing in from both sides and the white beam of my headlights cutting through the increasing darkness. The mile markers came faster now. 114.3, 114.2, 114.1. I was going backward. The numbers were decreasing. I should have been moving forward, climbing higher into the mountains, but the markers were going backward, which meant I was somehow moving in the opposite direction. Yet my car was heading the same way. My steering hadn't changed. I hadn't turned around. The horror of understanding began to crystallize then. The road wasn't obeying the rules of normal geography. The mile markers weren't arranged in a linear progression from south to north. They were arranged in something that looked like a line but functioned like a loop. A closed circuit. A place where forward movement was actually circular movement, and you could drive forever without ever arriving anywhere new. I was trapped. The creeping, eerie sensation became something sharper and more focused. This wasn't just wrong. This was intentional. Someone or something had created this place. This stretch of road that looked normal but functioned according to impossible mathematics. And I was caught inside it. I pressed the accelerator harder. 85, 90, 100 miles per hour. The trees became a blur on either side. The road stretched ahead, perfectly clear, perfectly empty. No oncoming traffic. No other cars, just the eternal mountain road going nowhere. Then came the first building. It appeared suddenly in my headlights. A small structure on the right side of the road. A house, maybe, or a cabin. I couldn't see it clearly at that speed, but I got the impression of something that had been abandoned for a very long time. Weathered wood, broken windows, a sense of profound isolation. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it had been real. I was certain of that. And if that building was real, then maybe something else was too. Maybe there was a way out of this loop. Maybe there was a town somewhere on this impossible stretch of road. Some place where the rules worked differently. Some place where I could find help. I slowed down deliberately, looking for another structure. Mile marker 114.2 appeared, then 114.1. The numbers were still going backward, still defying every principle of how mile markers should work. But I wasn't paying as much attention now. I was watching the road ahead for more signs of habitation. And I found it. A small town materialized at the edge of my headlights. Not a large place, maybe a dozen buildings clustered together on the mountainside. I could see the shapes of structures, a church steeple, what looked like a general store, a few houses scattered on the surrounding hillside. I slowed down even further, pulling into what appeared to be the main street. The town was lit by streetlights that glowed with a sickly yellow tinge. The light illuminated buildings that were simultaneously occupied and abandoned. Windows were dark, yet I had the unsettling sense that things were moving behind the glass. The few cars parked on the street were covered in a thick layer of dust, yet they looked relatively modern, like vehicles that had been sitting there for months. I came to a complete stop in the middle of the empty street. Nothing moved. The buildings stood silent. The streetlights hummed with a sound that made my teeth ache. And all around, I felt watched, the sensation of multiple eyes focusing on my vehicle from the darkness. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, pressing against my consciousness like weight. That's when I noticed the sign. Main Street, population, 87. But there was more. Below the population number, someone had written something in black marker. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. It said, "Don, to go to the diner." I didn't know why I read that as a suggestion I should violate rather than obey. But the terror of being trapped, the horror of realizing that I was caught in some kind of impossible geography, had triggered something in me that rejected reasonable caution. If someone had written a warning about the diner, then the diner was the place to go. The diner meant people. The diner meant answers. I found it 2 buildings down on the left. The sign read, Diner, in faded red letters. The windows were dark, but there was a faint glow coming from inside. Like candlelight, or very dim electric light, I pulled the car up in front and turned off the engine. The silence was oppressive. I sat in my vehicle for several minutes, building up the courage to step outside. Every instinct was screaming at me to start the engine again and drive. To get out of this town and back onto the loop. At least the loop was familiar now. At least I understood the specific parameters of the nightmare. But I was also desperate for human contact, for some explanation of what was happening, for some indication that I wasn't completely alone in whatever this place was. I opened the car door. The cold air that hit me was sharper than it should have been at that elevation. More penetrating. It felt like the cold of deep space, not the cool mountain air of October in Colorado. I locked my car and walked toward the diner entrance. The interior was exactly what I expected and also completely wrong. Booths lined the windows. A long counter ran along the opposite wall with stools that no one was sitting on. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dust. The walls were decorated with photographs and memorabilia that seemed to span several decades. Nothing moved. Nothing gave any sign of occupation. But the smell was real. Coffee, grease, the particular scent of a place where breakfast had been cooked thousands of times. The aroma hadn't faded. It was fresh, like someone had been cooking here recently. Like the diner was still operating, just between the visible moments. I moved to the counter and sat on one of the stools. No one emerged. I waited in the crushing silence for what might have been minutes or hours. Time felt negotiable now. I already spent time in a place where miles markers repeated and odometers tracked impossible distances. Minutes and hours probably didn't mean what they normally meant anymore. Then, slowly, the darkness started to lift. Not the darkness outside, the darkness in the diner. The interior began to brighten, not from any visible source. The light just increased gradually, like someone was slowly turning up a dimmer switch. And as the light grew, details materialized. The diner became occupied. People sat in the booths, or the shapes of people, or the idea of people. I couldn't quite focus on them clearly. My eyes slid away from them whenever I tried to look directly. But I could feel them. I could sense their presence. All of them looking at me with an attention that felt predatory. A figure appeared behind the counter. This one I could see more clearly, though the image was still slightly blurred. A woman, maybe. Or a man. The features weren't quite defined enough for me to be certain. The being was wearing an apron that said, Mel Diner, in faded blue stitching. You looking for a way out, the figure said. Not a question, a statement of fact. The voice sounded like it was coming from very far away, even though the figure was right in front of me. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. There is no out, the figure continued. There is only forward, always forward. But the road only has a beginning and a middle. It doesn't have an end. You passed the beginning a long time ago. Now you in the middle, and the middle is very, very long. What is this place? I finally managed to ask. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Thin, distant. This is the highway between worlds, the figure said. This is the road that doesn't appear on maps because it shouldn't exist. But it does. It exists because people built it. Your people. A long time ago, before they understood what they were doing. The figure leaned forward. You can leave, it said. But you have to know something first. Everyone who enters this road eventually understands the truth. The truth is that you are not moving forward through space anymore. You stopped doing that miles ago. Now you moving forward through time. The temperature in the diner dropped. You driving into your own future, the figure said. Every mile marker you pass is another year. Every loop you complete is another decade. You will keep driving. You will keep seeing the mile markers repeat. And eventually, you will arrive at the place you started, except it will be hundreds of years later, and everyone you ever knew will be long dead. That is when I understood. The horror wasn't that I was trapped in a place where the rules of geography didn't apply. The horror was that I was experiencing something far worse. I wasn't moving through space at all. I was moving through time. The road was taking me forward into a future I didn't want, at a speed I couldn't control. I ran from the diner. I got back in my car and drove. I drove faster than I'd ever driven before. 110 miles per hour. 120. The road was empty, imperfect, and terrible. The mile markers flashed past. 114.3, 114.2, 114.1, all the way down to 114.4, where I started. And then the cycle began again. 114.3, 114.2, 114.1, 114.4. I drove in circles. I drove in patterns. I drove because stopping meant accepting the truth of what the figure in the diner had told me. That I was trapped in a road that translated movement through space into movement through time. That every hour I drove was actually a year of my life passing. That I was aging in this place in a way that I couldn't perceive. I've been driving for 3 months. 3 months by the calendar. 3 months by my clock. 3 months by the aging of my body, which I can feel happening. My hands look older. My reflection in the rearview mirror shows gray that wasn't there before. But I've completed the loop 47 times. 47 times around the same 10-mile stretch of road. 47 years have passed in 3 months. And I can feel it. I can feel the time accumulating. The weight of years settling into my bones. My hair growing grayer. My vision starting to blur. The horrifying, terrifying, eerie truth I've come to understand is that I made a terrible mistake on that October evening. I didn't slow down when things got strange. I didn't pull over and wait for morning. I drove deeper into the mystery instead of away from it. And now I've been caught in a loop that I can escape. I've tried everything. I've tried stopping the car and walking into the forest. The forest has no end. It just goes on forever in all directions. I've tried backing up. The car wanted to go in reverse. I've tried slamming on the brakes and not driving. Time passes anyway. I can feel myself aging even when the car is parked. The only thing that seems to slow the process at all is driving. When I am moving, the aging seems to happen a bit slower. Or maybe it's just my mind creating a sense of control. Maybe it doesn't matter. The figure in the diner was right. It's only forward. It's only the endless road and the repeating mile markers and the knowledge that every circle I complete is another year taken from me. I should be 47 years old now, by the math of this place. But my mind still remembers being 28. I still remember what it felt like to be young. I still remember having a future stretched out in front of me that felt infinite. Now the future is just the road ahead. Repeating, endless, impossible. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because if I confess what happened, if I put the story out into the world, someone else won. You make the same mistake I made. Someone else will see that the mile markers are repeating and will understand that they need to stop. They need to leave the car and walk away, no matter what. But even as I think that, I know it won. It helped. Because the road exists outside of normal reality. The people trapped on it aren't the same people they were. And eventually, everyone who reads this warning will forget it. Because that's what this place does. It makes you forget. It makes you keep driving. I can feel myself forgetting now. My memories of the real world are becoming hazy. Denver seems like a dream. My apartment feels like a place I saw in a movie once. The people I loved are becoming faces without names, names without stories. All I have is the road. All I have is the mile marker 114.4. The same marker that appears and reappears, looping and repeating 47 times, 50 times. I've lost count. The only thing I know for certain is that I'm still aging. The only thing I know for certain is that I will keep driving until there's nothing left to drive. Until I become one of those shapes in the diner. Until I am part of the landscape that watches new travelers pass through. And maybe then I'll finally understand what this place is. Maybe then I'll finally know the answer to the question that terrifies me most of all. Maybe then I'll discover if I'm actually still alive. Story 8. Silence on Highway 18. Have you ever heard absolute silence? Not quiet, not stillness, true silence. The kind that makes your ears ring because your brain can process the absence of sound. The kind that tells you something is fundamentally wrong with the world around you. I found that silence on Highway 18 in northern Montana. And I need to tell you what happened before I forget how to speak at all. My name is David Garrett. I am 42 years old. I sell industrial equipment to factories across the Northwest. Nothing scary about my life. Nothing unusual. Just hotels and rental cars and long drives through empty country. I am the most boring person you ever meet. Which is why what happened to me is so terrifying. Because if it happened to me, it can happen to anyone. 3 nights ago, I was driving back from a client meeting in Kalispell. It was late, past midnight. The highway stretched ahead through dense forest, winding through mountains where civilization hadn't bothered to reach. My GPS showed another hour to my hotel. The radio played classic rock. My high beams cut through the darkness. Then the music stopped, not faded, not lost signal, just stopped, mid-song, like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. I reached for the dial, but before I could turn it, I noticed something else. My engine made no sound. I could feel it running, the vibration through the steering wheel, the RPM gauge holding steady. But there was no rumble, no mechanical hum, nothing. My tires should have been singing against asphalt. The wind should have been rushing past, but there was only silence. Heavy, oppressive, wrong. I rolled down the windows. The silence grew worse. It pressed against my eardrums like water pressure, like the world outside had been replaced with a vacuum. The trees lining the highway stood perfectly still. No wind, no rustling leaves, no animal sounds, no insects. The night offered no noise even with the windows down. Just that horrifying quiet that made my heartbeat sound like thunder in my own chest. I slowed down, checked my mirrors. The road behind me stretched empty. The road ahead curved into darkness. Nothing unusual, just highway and forest and night. Except for the silence. That creepy, unsettling silence that felt like being underwater or buried alive or in some nightmare where sound had been erased from existence. My phone showed full signal. I tried calling my wife. The screen indicated the call connected. But I heard nothing. Not ringing, not her voice, not even static. Just that same oppressive quiet pressing against my skull. I hung up, kept driving. What else could I do? Pull over and sit in that disturbing silence until sunrise? At least moving forward felt like making progress. Even if progress toward what, I couldn't say. The mile markers kept appearing. 47, 48, 49. Normal progression. The road curved naturally through the mountains. My headlights caught reflective signs. Deer crossing, steep grade, 35 miles per hour recommended. All the usual markers of a normal highway in normal country. But the silence persisted. And worse, I was starting to notice other things. The trees weren't moving. Not a single branch, not a single leaf. They stood like painted scenery, perfectly frozen. My headlights swept across them as I rounded curves, but they seemed flat. Two-dimensional, like driving through a photograph instead of a forest. The white lines on the road looked too bright, too perfect, like they'd been painted minutes ago. And the asphalt beneath my tires seemed smoother than it should be. No cracks, no patches, no wear, just flawless black surface rolling endlessly forward. Mile marker 50 appeared, then 51, then 52. I'd been driving for 20 minutes in total silence. My ears were ringing now. That high-pitched tone your brain creates when there's no sound to process. A constant eerie whine that made me want to scream just to hear something, anything, break the quiet. But I was afraid to scream, afraid of what might happen if I made noise in a place where noise shouldn't exist. At mile marker 53, I saw the first car. It sat on the shoulder, lights off, driver, its door hanging open. A blue sedan, modern, maybe 3 or 4 years old. As I passed, my headlights illuminated the interior. Empty, keys still in the ignition, a coffee cup in the holder, a phone on the passenger seat. But no driver, no signs of struggle, just an abandoned car sitting in perfect silence. My hands tightened on the wheel. Every instinct told me to stop, to check if someone needed help. But something deeper, something primal, screamed at me to keep moving. To not stop, to not add myself to whatever had happened here. I pressed the accelerator, 60 miles per hour, 65, 70. The engine still made no sound. The tires still rolled in perfect quiet. The wind still refused to whistle through my open windows. Just that oppressive, terrifying silence that seemed to grow heavier with each mile. Mile marker 54 brought another car. Red pickup truck, also on the shoulder, also abandoned. Door open, engine running, but no sound from the motor. Just that same horrible quiet. Mile marker 55, a motorcycle on its side. Helmet nearby. No rider. Mile marker 56, an SUV. A minivan, a semi-truck with its trailer doors swinging silently in wind I couldn't feel. They lined the highway like monuments, like warnings, all abandoned, all empty, all sitting in that chilling silence that pressed against my mind like fingers trying to pry their way inside. I wanted to turn around, to go back the way I came, but when I checked my mirrors, I saw something that froze my blood. The road behind me was gone. Not dark, not hidden, gone. Where asphalt should have stretched back toward civilization, there was only blackness. Not shadow, not night, absolute void. Like the highway was erasing itself behind me, unmaking reality as I moved forward. I faced forward, gripped the wheel, kept driving. What else could I do? Mile marker 57. More cars, dozens now, lining both shoulders. Some crashed into trees, some perfectly parked, all abandoned, all silent. And then I saw the people. They stood beside their vehicles, perfectly still, facing the forest. Men, women, different ages, different builds, all frozen in identical poses, arms at their sides, heads slightly tilted, looking into the darkness between the trees as if seeing something I couldn't see. I drove past the first one, a man in a business suit. My headlights swept across him. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, staring into the woods with an expression of peaceful emptiness. Then another, a woman in jeans and a jacket. Same pose, same slight head tilt, same vacant stare. Then more, dozens, hundreds. Every few feet another person stood beside an abandoned vehicle, all facing the forest, all perfectly still, all trapped in that horrifying silence. My heart hammered, my breath came in short gasps, but I couldn't hear either. The silence swallowed everything, even the sounds my own body should make. I tried to scream. My throat worked, my lungs pushed air, but no sound emerged. The silence had taken my voice. It was inside me now, part of me, converting me into another piece of this nightmare. Mile marker 58. The people were closer to the road now, standing at the white line, still facing the forest, still motionless, but as my headlights touched them, I saw their mouths were open. Wide open, like they'd been screaming when the silence took them. Mile marker 59. They were on the road now, standing in my lane. I swerved around the first one. A teenage boy. His eyes were empty, his mouth stretched in a silent scream. He didn't move as I passed within inches. More head, scattered across both lanes. I wove between them, my hands shaking, my mind fracturing under the weight of that oppressive quiet. They stood like statues, like monuments to sound itself dying. And I was driving deeper into whatever had killed it. The forest was changing. The trees were taller now, darker. They leaned over the highway, branches reaching toward each other, forming a tunnel. The stars disappeared. My headlights seemed dimmer, struggling against darkness that pressed in from all sides. Mile marker 60. The people blocked the road completely. A wall of bodies, all facing the forest, all with mouths open in silent screams. I couldn't go forward, couldn't turn around. The void behind me was still erasing the highway, swallowing everything I passed. I stopped the car. The moment I did, something changed. The silence shifted. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full, pregnant with something waiting to be born. I could feel it pressing against the inside of my skull. A pressure building. A sound trying to happen but trapped in a place where sound couldn't exist. The people began to move. Not walking, rotating. All of them turning in perfect unison. Slowly, mechanically, pivoting to face me. Hundreds of empty eyes locking onto my car. Hundreds of mouths still stretched in silent screams. They began to walk forward, step by step, in perfect synchronization. A wall of bodies advancing through that oppressive silence. Getting closer, closer. Their hands reaching out, their faces blank, their movements precise and inhuman. I threw the car in reverse, pressed the accelerator. The car moved backward, but the void was right there, right behind me, inches away, the place where reality ended and nothing began. The people kept coming, 20 feet away, 15, 10, and then I heard it. Not a sound, the opposite of sound, a negative noise, an anti-sound that was somehow worse than silence. It came from the forest, from between those dark trees, a presence so massive it bent space around itself, so vast it made the silence seem small by comparison. The people stopped walking. They all turned back toward the forest, toward that thing I couldn't see but could feel pressing against reality like a hand against glass. Their mouths opened wider, impossibly wide, and from those mouths came nothing. Not silence, not sound, but nothing itself. Absence made manifest, a void that reached out and began to pull at me. I felt my voice starting to leave, not my ability to speak. My voice itself, the fundamental thing that made sounds mine. It was being drawn out, extracted, added to that terrible nothing spreading from the forest. I slammed the car into drive, closed my eyes, and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The car surged forward. I felt impacts, bodies hitting the hood, the windshield, but still no sound. Just that horrible nothing that was trying to unmake me. I drove blind, counting seconds, 10, 20, 30, feeling the car shake and lurch but hearing nothing. Nothing. 40 seconds, 50, 60. I opened my eyes. The highway was normal, empty. The forest stood at a respectful distance. The mile marker read 61, and through my open windows came sound. Beautiful, normal, terrifying sound. Wind, engine, tires, the radio playing the same song that had stopped 20 miles ago, continuing exactly where it left off. I pulled over, sat shaking. My ears were ringing from the sudden assault of noise after so much silence. I grabbed my phone, called my wife, heard it ring, heard her voice, sleepy and confused, but real and solid and proof that sound existed again. I told her to call back, sat there breathing, listening to my breath, to my heartbeat, to the engine idling, to every tiny sound I'd taken for granted my entire life. When I finally continued driving, I checked my mirrors constantly, watching for that void, listening for silence, but the night remained normal, full of sound, full of life. I reached my hotel at 2 a.m. Haven, to slept since. Ken, to stop listening to sounds. The heater, the traffic outside, the ice machine down the hall. Every noise is precious now. Every sound a miracle. But here is what keeps me awake. Here is what makes this truly terrifying. 3 times today, the noticed moments of silence. Just brief ones. A second, maybe 2. The world goes quiet. Then sound returns. And each time, those moments last a little longer. The silence is spreading, growing, claiming more territory. I don't know what that thing in the forest was. I don't know what happened to those people. But I think I understand now. Sound is a barrier. Noise keeps something out. Some vast, hungry presence that lives in the spaces between sounds. And on Highway 18, in that stretch of forest, the barrier got thin. The silence broke through, and that thing began to feed. It is still there, waiting, growing. And every time the world goes quiet, every time you notice an absence of sound, it is getting a little bit closer. Pay attention to silence, real silence, the kind that makes your ears ring, the kind that feels wrong, because that is not empty space. That is something pushing through, something that wants to take your voice, your sounds, everything that makes you real. And when you hear nothing at all, when true silence wraps around you on some empty highway or in some dark room, understand that you are not alone in the quiet. You are surrounded by something that has been waiting forever for the sound to stop. Story 9. Road that felt closed behind him. Do you know what it sounds like when a highway disappears? I do. It sounds like silence swallowing everything you've ever known, 1 mile marker at a time. I was driving home from a job site in Montana, taking Route 89 through the mountains because the interstate was closed for construction. It was late September, and the sun was dropping fast, painting the pine trees black against an orange sky that looked like something was burning just beyond the horizon. My truck was loaded with tools, my phone showed 2 bars of signal, and I had maybe 3 hours of driving left. Everything was normal, everything was fine, until I saw the deer. It was standing in the middle of my lane, but it wasn't looking at me. It was staring back down the road, back the way I did come, with its ears pinned flat against its skull. Every muscle in its body was rigid with terror. I'd seen spooked deer before, seen them bolt from car headlights and freeze in confusion, but I'd never seen one look like that. Like it was watching something horrifying approach, something worse than me. I slowed down, honked. The deer didn't move, didn't even twitch. So I eased around it, watching it in my mirror as I passed. It stayed there, frozen, staring at something I couldn't see. And then the road curved, and it was gone. That is when I noticed the silence. My radio had been playing. Classic rock, nothing special, just background noise to fill the empty miles. Now it was dead, not static, not fuzzing in and out. Just gone, like someone had cut the power. I reached for the dial, and my hand froze halfway there. In my rearview mirror, the road behind me looked wrong. It was darker, not evening dark, not shadow dark. This was something else, something thicker, like the asphalt itself was turning into liquid night. The white lines were disappearing into it, swallowed one by one, and that darkness was spreading forward, toward me, not fast, but steady, inevitable. I pressed the gas pedal. My speedometer climbed, 50, 60. The engine roared, loud in the creepy silence where my radio used to be. But when I checked the mirror again, that darkness was closer, moving at exactly my speed, matching me, keeping pace. The trees on either side of the road started to blur, not from speed. They were actually blurring, losing definition, their edges going soft and uncertain like they were melting into the growing shadows. The temperature inside my truck dropped. My breath came out in clouds. In September, in a heated cab, I pushed harder. 70 miles per hour on a mountain road with curves that could kill you if you weren't too careful. But being careful seemed less important than being fast, than staying ahead of whatever was erasing the world behind me. A sign flashed past. Yellow. Warning. But the words on it were wrong. Not scrambled or misspelled. Wrong in a way that made my eyes hurt to look at them, like they were letters from an alphabet that shouldn't exist. And underneath those impossible words, something that might have been English. No return beyond this point. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The road ahead was still clear, still normal, lit by my headlights in the last dying rays of sunlight. But behind me, the darkness had consumed everything. The mountains, the trees, the sky itself. It was just blackness now. Absolute and total. And somewhere in that blackness, movement. Shapes that were bigger than trucks, taller than trees, moving with a slow, deliberate patience that was somehow more terrifying than any speed. I couldn't stop. The thought of stopping, of letting that darkness catch up, filled me with a primal fear that lived somewhere below thought, in the ancient part of the brain that remembers when humans were prey. Another sign, another warning. This one was clearer. Road ends 15 miles. But I'd been on this highway before. It didn't end. It connected to Route 12, then to the interstate. It went on for hundreds of miles. Except now, apparently, it didn't. The darkness in my mirror had faces now. I caught glimpses of them in the rear view, there and gone in an instant. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouths open in screams I couldn't hear over the roar of my engine. They pressed against the boundary of that spreading shadow like they were trapped behind glass, and their hands reached forward, grasping, pleading. I knew those faces. Not personally, not by name, but I knew the type. They were the faces of people who disappeared on roads like this. The missing persons cases you see on the news. The ones where they find the car but never the driver. The unsolved vanishings that happen on lonely stretches of highway in the middle of nowhere. The cases that just go cold. They found this road too. Or it had found them. And now they lived in that darkness. Trapped. Aware. Eternally reaching for the light they'd never touch again. My fuel gauge caught my eye. Quarter tank. But I filled up less than an hour ago. The needle was dropping as I watched, falling steadily like something was drinking my gas, draining it faster than the engine could burn it. The road started to narrow, subtly at first. The white lines crept inward, inch by inch, mile by mile. The shoulders disappeared, the trees pressed closer, their twisted branches reaching across like fingers trying to grab my roof. And still I drove, because stopping was not an option. Stopping meant being swallowed. Stopping meant joining those faces in the darkness. A building appeared ahead, old, abandoned, a rest stop or ranger station that had been forgotten by time and maintenance budgets. Its windows were dark, its parking lot empty except for a single car. A sedan, covered in dust. The license plate was from 1987. I didn't slow down. Couldn't. But as I passed, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice water. Someone was standing in the doorway. Just standing there, watching. Not moving, not waving. Just watching with eyes that caught my headlights and reflected them back like a cat. And as I sped past, they raised one hand slowly and pointed. Not at me, behind me, at the darkness. Their mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. It's getting hungry. The fuel gauge hit empty. My engine coughed, sputtered, and the horrifying reality of my situation crystallized in my mind like ice forming on glass. I was going to run out of gas. I was going to stop. And when I did, that darkness would catch me, would pull me into itself like it had pulled in everyone else who found themselves on this nightmare road that shouldn't exist. But then I saw it. Ahead. A light. Warm. Yellow. Real. It looked like salvation. Like hope. Like everything that darkness wasn't. A gas station. Small. Old-fashioned. The kind that sells more beer and beef jerky than actual gas. But it was there. Real. Solid. And most importantly, it was ahead of me, in the light, not behind me in the dark. I aimed for it. My engine was dying, coughing black smoke, running on fumes and prayers. The speedometer fell, 60, 50, 40. The darkness behind me surged forward, sensing weakness, closing the distance. 30 miles per hour, 20. The gas station was so close. I could see the pumps, see the lights inside the building, see a figure moving behind the counter. 10 miles per hour. 5. My truck rolled into the parking lot and died. Just stopped, like something had reached up and grabbed the axle. The silence that followed was crushing. Complete. The kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums until they scream. I sat there, hands locked on the wheel, too terrified to look in the rearview mirror. Too terrified to see how close the darkness had come. My breath fogged the windshield. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The gas station, its door opened. A man stepped out. Older, weathered, wearing a uniform that might have been blue once but had faded to something closer to gray. He walked toward my truck with slow, measured steps, his boots crunching on gravel that sounded too loud in the eerie silence. He tapped on my window. I jumped, nearly screaming. His face was kind, concerned, normal, blessedly, horrifyingly normal. I rolled down the window. Cold air rushed in, but not the terrible cold from before. Just autumn night air, crisp and clean. He looked at me, then past me, at the darkness that had followed. His expression didn't. He changed, like he saw this every night, like I wasn't. The first, he jerked his thumb toward the building and mouthed one word, inside. I didn't need to be told twice. I threw open the door and ran. The gravel seemed wrong under my feet, too soft, like it might give way and drop me into something far below. The distance between my truck and the building stretched impossibly far, and then suddenly I was there, bursting through the door into light and warmth and the smell of old coffee and stale cigarettes. The door slammed shut behind me. Locked. I heard the click, felt the vibration through my bones. The man entered a moment later. Calmly, carefully, he locked the door behind himself with 3 different locks. Then he turned and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten how to be surprised. He walked behind the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. He slid one across to me. I took it, kneaded it. My hands were shaking so bad the coffee sloshed over the rim. We stood there in silence, drinking, waiting, and that is when I realized I couldn't see out the windows. The glass was there, but it was black, completely black, like someone had painted over them, or like the darkness outside had pressed itself against the glass so completely that no light could penetrate it. Something hit the building, a thump, soft but heavy, then another, then dozens, all around us, like hands, pressing, searching, testing. The lights flickered. The man didn't react, just kept drinking his coffee, watching me. The pressure built. I could feel it, in my ears, in my chest. The building groaned. The walls creaked. And I understood. This place was an island, a bubble, a tiny pocket of light and reality in an ocean of something else. And that ocean was trying very hard to get in. Hours passed, I think. Time felt strange, stretchy. The coffee never ran out. The man never spoke. The darkness never left. And then, gradually, it began to retreat. The pressure eased. The thumping stopped. The windows cleared, revealing not darkness but the gray light of dawn. Early morning, cold and clean and real. The man unlocked the door, stepped outside, checked, came back in and nodded. I walked out on legs that barely worked. My truck was still there. The darkness was gone. The road behind me was normal. Just a highway, just asphalt and white lines and trees. Everything as it should be. But when I looked down at the gravel, I saw them. Handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the dirt all around my truck. Small ones, large ones, prints with too many fingers, prints with none at all. I got in my truck, turned the key. The engine started immediately. The fuel gauge read full. I drove away from that place, back toward civilization, back toward the world where roads go where they supposed to, and darkness is just the absence of light. Nothing more. But here is what I can forget. Here is what wakes me up at night, sweating and gasping. As I pulled out of that parking lot, as I merged back onto the highway that now looked normal and safe, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The gas station was gone. Not abandoned, not closed, gone. Just empty forest where it had been, like it had never existed. And standing where the building had been, barely visible in the morning light, was a sign. Old, wooden, weathered. It said, "The road that feels closed behind you. No U-turns, no stopping, no return." I haven't driven at night since then. Haven't taken any back roads. Haven't trusted any highway that looks too empty or too quiet. Because I know now, I know that some roads, Dawn, they just go from place to place. Some of them go somewhere else entirely, somewhere that exists in the spaces between destinations. in the gaps on the map where cartographers look away. And the most chilling part? I check the news now, every day, looking for stories about people who disappeared on highways. And I find them. More than you think. More than there should be. Just last week, a guy vanished on Route 89 in Montana. They found his truck on the shoulder, engine running, lights on, door open, no sign of struggle, no footprints, nothing, just gone. And I wonder, every single day, if he saw the deer, if his radio went silent, if he looked in his rearview mirror and saw the darkness coming. I wonder if he is one of those faces now, pressed against the boundary, reaching for a light he'll never touch again. The road that feels closed behind you, it is out there, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, you've already been on it. You just haven't looked back yet. Story 10. Drive it didn't. The end at home. The most terrifying thing about that night wasn't what I saw in my rearview mirror. It was realizing that some journeys dawn to end when you reach your destination. They follow you inside, they wait, and they never really let you go. I am a project manager from Columbus, Ohio. 42 years old, married with 2 kids. I drive the same route home from work every weekday evening. Take Route 33 east for 12 miles, exit at Bryce Road, turn left on Stelzer, then wind through 3 suburban streets until I reach my driveway. 28 minutes door to door. I've made that drive so many times I could do it in my sleep. Maybe that's why I didn't notice when something started following me. It was a Thursday in late October when I first felt it. That creepy sensation of being watched. I stayed late at the office finishing quarterly reports, leaving around 9:30 instead of my usual 6. The parking garage was nearly empty. My footsteps echoed off concrete walls as I walked to my car. And I remember thinking how eerie the fluorescent lights looked. Flickering, casting shadows that seemed too dark, too deep. I got in my Honda Accord, locked the doors immediately like I always do, and headed home. Route 33 was quiet. Most of the traffic had cleared out hours ago. Just a few scattered vehicles here and there. Semis hauling goods through the night. A couple of sedans with tired commuters inside. And one car that stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me. I noticed it after about 5 miles. A dark sedan, black or maybe dark blue. Hard to tell in the weak highway lighting. No distinguishing features, just headlights in my mirror, maintaining perfect distance. When I changed lanes, it changed lanes. When I sped up slightly, it matched my speed. When I slowed down, it slowed down. My heart started beating faster. I told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people take Route 33. It is a major highway. Just coincidence that someone happened to be going the same direction at the same speed. But then I took my exit. The car followed. I turned left on Stelzer. The car turned left on Stelzer. Fear crawled up my throat. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. This was intentional. Someone was following me home. My mind raced through possibilities. Road rage from some incident I didn't remember. Mistaken identity? Something worse? I made a snap decision. Instead of heading toward my neighborhood, I turned right onto Refugee Road, away from my house. The car stayed behind me. Still 3 car lengths back. Never closer, never farther. I drove past strip malls and gas stations. Their lights bright against the darkness. Past a 24-hour diner where a few lonely souls sat in booths visible through plate glass windows. Past an abandoned Kmart with plywood over its windows and weeds growing through cracks in its parking lot. The car followed every turn. My phone sat in the cup holder. I grabbed it and called my wife, keeping one hand on the wheel. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She probably put the kids to bed and fallen asleep herself. I didn't leave a message. What would I say? That I was being followed by a car that hadn't actually done anything threatening? That I felt unsafe but couldn't explain why? I decided to drive to the police station. It was only 3 miles away, right off Hamilton Road. If this car was still following me when I pulled into the station parking lot, they have proof. Do you have witnesses? The police could handle it. But when I turned onto Hamilton Road, something horrifying happened. The car was suddenly in front of me. I hadn't seen it pass. Hadn't seen it turn or accelerate or do anything that would explain how it got ahead of me. 1 second it was in my rearview mirror. The next second its taillights glowed red in front of my windshield. Same car, same dark sedan, same unsettling presence. I slammed on my brakes, my tires squealing. The car ahead maintained its speed, slowly pulling away before making a right turn and disappearing down a side street. My hands shook on the steering wheel. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Cars done to just teleport from behind you to in front of you. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it wasn't the same car. Maybe I'd gotten confused in my panic, mistaken a different vehicle for the one that had been following me. But I knew that wasn't true. Some deep instinct told me I just witnessed something wrong. Something that operated outside natural laws. I sat at a red light, breathing hard, trying to calm my racing heart. The police station was just ahead. I could still go there, file a report, tell them what happened. But what had actually happened? A car followed me for a while, then drove away. They think I was crazy or paranoid or wasting their time. The light turned green. I drove past the police station and headed home. The rest of the drive felt normal. No cars followed me. No strange occurrences. Just empty suburban streets and the familiar landmarks of my neighborhood. I turned onto my street and saw my house halfway down the block. Porch light on. Living room dark. Everything exactly as it should be. I pulled into my driveway and put the car in park. Turned off the engine. Sat in the silence. That is when I felt it. The overwhelming sensation that my drive wasn't finished. That despite being home, despite having reached my destination, something remained incomplete. Like I left part of myself on that highway and it was still out there, still driving, still being followed by that dark sedan through endless night. I shook my head, trying to clear it. Just nerves. Just the lingering adrenaline from a scary situation. I grabbed my briefcase and walked to my front door. The house was quiet. My wife had left a lamp on in the hallway. I could hear the furnace humming, the refrigerator clicking on in the kitchen. Normal sounds, safe sounds, home sounds, but something felt off. I walked through the living room. Everything was in place. Same furniture, same family photos on the walls, same throw pillows my wife had bought last month. But it all looked slightly wrong, like a photograph that it's been perfectly reproduced but is missing some essential quality that makes it real. I climbed the stairs to check on my kids. My son. This room first. He was asleep, curled under his dinosaur blankets. 7 years old, peaceful. Then my daughter. This room. She was 11, sprawled across her bed the way she always slept. Both of them breathing softly, completely unaware of their father standing in their doorways, feeling an inexplicable dread. My wife was asleep in our bedroom. I stood watching her for a long moment. This woman I'd been married to for 13 years. She looked exactly like herself. But again, that strange sense of wrongness persisted, like I was looking at a perfect copy of my life rather than my actual life. I went back downstairs and poured myself a bourbon, drank it standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at my backyard. The motion sensor light clicked on, illuminating the grass and the swing set in the shed where I kept my tools. Something moved at the edge of the yard. I squinted through the glass. There, at the property line where our fence met the neighbor, a shadow stood. Tall, human-shaped, completely still, just standing there in the darkness beyond the reach of the motion light. My blood turned to ice water. I set down my glass and moved closer to the window. The shadow didn't move. It simply stood there, watching my house, watching me. I flipped on the back porch light. The additional illumination should have revealed what was standing there. Should have shown me it was just a trick of the light, a bush or fence post that looked human-shaped from this angle. But the shadow remained, dark, solid, undeniably present. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the flashlight app, then unlocked the back door and stepped onto the porch. Cold October air hit my face. I aimed the phone, this light at the spot where the shadow stood. Nothing, just grass and fence and darkness beyond. But I could still feel it watching me. I went back inside and locked the door, checked all the windows on the first floor, all locked, checked the front door, locked. I was being irrational. There was nothing out there. Nothing following me, nothing watching my house. Just a stressful evening that had set my nerves on edge. I went upstairs and got ready for bed, brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, slipped under the covers next to my sleeping wife, closed my eyes, and heard a car engine idling in my driveway. My eyes snapped open. I lay frozen, listening. The sound was unmistakable. A vehicle running right outside my house. Not a neighbor. Its car. Not a passing vehicle on the street. Something in my driveway. Its engine purring softly through the night. I got out of bed and went to the window, pulled back the curtain. My car sat in the driveway exactly where I parked it. But the headlights were on, and someone sat in the driver's seat. I couldn't see their face, couldn't make out any details. Just a dark silhouette behind the wheel of my own car, visible in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Sitting in my vehicle, In my driveway, outside my home, terror paralyzed me. I stood at the window, unable to move, unable to think clearly. This was impossible. My keys were downstairs in the bowl by the front door. My car was locked. No one could be inside it. No one should be inside it. But someone was. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been seconds. Could have been minutes. Time felt distorted, stretched thin by fear. Then the figure in my car turned its head and looked directly at my bedroom window. At me, I stumbled backward, my legs hitting the bed. My wife stirred but didn't wake. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake, to tell her something horrifying was happening. But my voice wouldn't work. My throat had closed with fear. When I looked out the window again, my car's headlights were off. The engine was silent. The driver's seat was empty. I spent the rest of that night sitting in a chair in my bedroom, watching the window, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Dawn eventually came, pale gray light filtering through the curtains. My wife's alarm went off at 6:30. She woke up, saw me sitting there fully dressed, and asked if I was feeling okay. I told her I had trouble sleeping. Work stress. She accepted this explanation and went to shower. The next evening, I left work at my normal time, 6 o'clock. The drive home should have been routine. 28 minutes door to door. Same route I'd taken 1,000 times. But as I merged onto Route 33, I saw the dark sedan 3-car lengths behind me. My stomach dropped. It was back, following me again. Or maybe it had never left. Maybe it had been waiting in some pocket of reality, biding its time, ready to resume the chase. I tried everything, changed lanes repeatedly, took random exits, drove through parking lots and side streets. Nothing worked. The car stayed with me, maintaining that exact 3-car length distance. Never closer, never farther away. When I finally reached my street, exhausted and terrified, the car followed me all the way to my driveway. But when I put my car in park and looked in my rearview mirror, the street behind me was empty. I ran inside, locked every door, checked every window. My family ate dinner while I paced the house, jumping at every sound, watching the darkness outside for signs of the sedan or the shadow or whatever was hunting me. Because that is what I realized. Something was hunting me, had been hunting me since that first night. And every time I drove home, I brought it with me. It was getting stronger, more present, more real, bleeding through from wherever it existed into my world, using my daily commute as a doorway. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, every night when I drive home, the dark sedan follows. Every night, I see the shadow in my backyard. Every night, I find someone sitting in my car in my driveway. And every night, my house feels a little less like home and a little more like a stage set designed to look like home. My wife hasn't noticed anything wrong. Neither have my kids. They go about their lives normally, completely unaware that reality has become thin and permeable around us. Or maybe they were not unaware. Maybe they read part of it now too. Maybe I'm the only real thing left in this copy of my life. I don't know it wants me or why. I don't know what I did to attract its attention. All I know is that the drive never ends. Even when I'm home, sitting in my living room, eating dinner with my family, lying in my bed at night, part of me is still out there on Route 33. Still being followed, still trying to escape something that can to be escaped. The worst part is the certainty I feel. The knowledge that one night, I'll drive home and the dark sedan won to stay 3-car lengths behind. It will pull up alongside me, and I'll finally see what has been chasing me all this time. I'll see what has been sitting in my car at night. I'll see what I've been bringing home with me. And on that night, the drive really will end. But I want to be the one who gets out of the car. Some roads don't end when you turn into your driveway. They stay with you during the next night drive. This channel isn't about one story. It's about every road after midnight. Subscribe.